You want to make arrowheads, huh? Brilliant, me too, there's loads to pick from. But first we're going to need some tools. Today we're going to be making a mandrel or beak iron for shaping arrowhead sockets, in addition to my favourite pair of tongs for holding arrowheads. This video uses information from episode 1 and 2 in my Blacksmithing for Beginners series, which you can find here. Right, let's start with the mandrel. The process for making the mandrel is very similar to making the round punch that we made previously. First, we're going to put an aggressively steep taper on the end to avoid rolling the edges over and forming a carp's mouth, which leads to cold shuts and then cracks on the end. Once this taper is established, we can then work it back in order to elongate the taper. Once it's around 4.5 centimetres, though exact dimensions aren't important, we're going to start rounding it off. First by octagonalising it, and then rolling it under the hammer and knocking all the remaining corners off. We'll let it cool slowly by setting it aside on the coke. We're not putting it in the water, since it's made of high carbon steel, it could fracture when cooled too quickly. Once it's cool enough to handle, we'll use a file just to knock off any irregularities in the taper. It's always worth getting as close to a perfect taper as possible at the anvil, so this step doesn't take you what feels like 4 years. When using this mandrel for shaping sockets, it doesn't need to come to a perfect point. Since the mandrel is primarily used for shaping the open end of the socket, I've always found that having the mandrel too long and coming to too sharp a point actually gets in the way, so we're just going to chop that end off. Then, we don't need all of the length we have here. About 170mm will do, so I also chop that off. This is my current mandrel I use for making arrowheads. It has a squared off shank designed to go in a vise. This video assumes minimal tooling, so for the mandrel we're making today, we're going to put a taper on the other end, drill a hole into a stump of wood and drive it in instead. Next we're going to put a taper on the other end of the mandrel, in the same manner as the first. However, in this case we're not going to round it off, since driving the sharp square corners into a round hole will give it better purchase in the stump and stop it twisting in situ. At this point we have a mandrel. Currently it sticks straight up, which is A, a pain to use, and B, a pain to hammer into the stump. So we're going to bend it in the middle, to a touch less than 90 degrees. You can do this over the edge of your anvil, or the horn if you have one. This is then heat treated in the same way as the punch in episode 2. See there for more details. The mandrel, for arrow making at least, doesn't take significant abuse, so the heat treat isn't crucial. First, we normalise the mandrel by holding it in the fire at critical temperature for about 20 minutes, then letting it air cool. We then preheat the oil, heat the piece to non-magnetic and then quench it in the warm oil. Finally, we knock the scale off with a file so that we can see the temper colours, and running it back and forth through the flames until the temper colours go beyond dark straw and into the browns. And this is our finished mandrel, which is now ready to be put to work. I just drilled a hole into a stump and drove it in with a wooden mallet. The hole ensures that the wood won't crack from having essentially a wedge driven into it. Before we get on to making arrowhead tongs, it's time for a word from our sponsors. Oh, wait, that's also me. Have you been watching these videos and thinking, hot diggity damn, I want to go? Well, have I got some news for you. Not only am I a digital entity on YouTube, but I'm also a real-life actual person who teaches classes for you to have a go at blacksmithing. If you've never touched a hammer in your life, or you're a hobbyist looking to hone your skills, come visit me in beautiful rural Lancashire and bash some hot metal, like these lovely folks did. Look how happy they were. That could be you. Just check out the link in the description below. Now, back to the video. I was introduced to these as arrowhead tongs. I've not heard them called that anywhere else, but they're my favourite type for making arrowheads. In the style of Blue Peter from years gone by, here's some tong blanks I made earlier. For the steps on how to get this far, please watch episode 1, found here. The first modification we're going to make is to taper one side of the tong jaws. We don't want to interfere with its connection to the boss, but we want to blend that into a round tapered jaw. To achieve this, we draw out the jaws into a long square taper, and then we knock the corners off and round it up. I've also found that putting the bend in it shown here gives more surface area contact at the tip of the tongs to provide better stability for the arrowhead. The taper is excessively long at the moment, but we'll do the other side of the jaws and then cut the end off to match. For the other jaws, we just need to draw out the short, thick jaw to be longer and thinner. These jaws are only designed to hold small arrowheads, so they don't need to be thick and sturdy. We don't want to increase the width of this side, so we'll keep turning and dressing the width in, reducing the thickness but increasing the length. Once this side is drawn out, we use it as a measure to remove excess material from the tapered jaw and cut that off in whatever manner you wish. I'm using the Hot Cut Hardy. You could easily use a hacksaw or an angle grinder. Then, as in episode 1, we're going to punch the holes for the rivet and then rivet the two halves together. Hot this time. I was feeling spicy. As you can see, we've gotten the arms bent at some point in production. So it's worth just taking some time now to sort that out and make sure everything is pointing in the right direction and that the arms are nice and straight. Once the final adjustments are made, there we have it. Our Mandrel and our Tongs are all ready to be making arrowheads in the next episode. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider a like and subscribe to see more videos like this in the future. If you'd like to give extra support to the channel, please consider becoming a Patreon. Link below, like these lovely people scrolling past now. Hey, so after filming this video, I realised that my Mandrel has a massive great crack running down the centre of it. This is always one of the ever-present dangers of using reclaimed steel rather than new steel. The microfractures in it from its hard life as a cast spring beforehand can then break apart during the quench. This happens sometimes. Don't worry if it happens to you. You can always grab another bit of steel and go again. If you see me using my other Mandrel in future videos, I just wanted to let you know that's why.